dark one stretching out his hand. The dragon's reborn. The fire's been fanned. But everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand.
The title of this episode might as well be Ground Printer. Our house looks... Our old house, which we are still living in, as of the time of recording and the time of the release of this episode. All the wall hangings are down. All the books are gone, which was a Herculean feat.
Emily did a great job.
We both did a good job. And we just took the small shelf that the printer was on, so now that the printer is just on the ground, like unto the days of New York.
Yep, where we just had a printer on the ground by the front door.
I think then I got that shelf, right, that the TV is on currently, and then the printer was off the ground.
Maybe.
But no TV.
I can't, but we did not have a television, that's correct. We just watched things, usually on Emily's laptop.
New York, I am amazed that this laptop has lasted as long as it has.
It's done great.
I know it theoretically hasn't lasted really a long time. It's only been 5 years, but in PC years especially, that's like... It's a grandma.
Yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't be drinking this Diet Coke right now.
No, I think it's fine. Tibble, how was dinner? This is the last time... Well, I don't know. This may be one of the last times you hear Tibble eating in the background, because in the future we'll be recording in a place that is not next to his food bowl or his litter box.
Yeah, we will be a whole floor away from both of those things.
Yeah, if you can hear Tibble eating or using the litter box in a recording in the future, then that is a serious problem.
Because who knows what we've done.
That needs to be addressed.
Yeah, please check in on us if you hear that.
Are you guys okay?
Yeah, just send us a tweet. You alright?
You good?
Y'all good?
You good?
Heard your cat shitting. I can't give you a thumbs up.
I understood.
My thumb is always up.
Sally's wearing a brace.
Too tight. It's a little red.
I was like, is your thumb supposed to look like that? It's turning purple.
Yeah, this brace is fine. It's not, like, very expensive. But I'm having a really, really bad pain flare-up in my wrist, so it's like, I'll try this.
Which I'm sure isn't helped by the fact that we're moving, so...
Yeah. Well, and we're really close to being done with transcripts in season 4. Like, we have 2 left.
Oh, yeah.
The one I'm working on now, and then next week's.
Yeah,
so
we're about halfway
like,
done with season 5.
Transcribing a lot, and that is just, like,
Yeah. Yep. It hurts the wrist.
Click, clack, moo. Cows that type. That's a fun book. I'd recommend looking it up. So yeah, it looks a little better.
EHR. I hope there's a list that's like EHR recommends, and on it now is Click Clack Moo. How's that done?
It's a fun book. I remember
it.
liking it a lot. I should add that.
We should build a syllabus around it. I couldn't remember the word for syllabus for a minute. I thought resume.
Yeah, build a resume around it.
Build a resume around Click Clack Moo. How's that type? I assume it would all be typing speed related.
Yeah.
Not that anyone really needs to know your typing speed anymore.
I feel like it'd be very hard to type if you had cloven hooves.
Yeah. Is that like the central conflict of the story? I haven't read it.
I can't remember. I have to look up Click Clack Moo.
Clack Moo, cows that type.
What's the plot of Click Clack Moo?
I still put my typing speed on my resume, not because I think it actually is relevant, but because I have an impressive typing speed, and I just want prospective employers to know that.
What's your typing speed?
It's like 120 or something.
I think last time I did mine it was like 115 or 120.
Yeah.
It's that writer's life, you know?
It's writer's life, it's English major's life. When all you're doing is writing essays, you just become very good at typing.
Click Clack Moo, Cows That Type is a 2000 children's book by Doreen Cronin. Illustrated by Betsy Lewin, the Simon & Schuster book tells the story of Farmer Brown's cows who find an old typewriter in the barn and proceed to write letters to Farmer Brown, making various demands and then going on strike when they aren't met.
So it's a book about social justice and activism rather than overcoming
your cloven hooves.
Disability?
Yeah, it's
disability
about
to have cloven
unionizing.
hooves if you're a cow. If you're a person, maybe look into that.
Might want to get that checked out.
You're the Antichrist, maybe?
Yeah, it's about union. It's about.
Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
I was trying to make it's about. It's.
What's happening?
This joke sounds so much funnier in my head because I like cannot say the word.
Still don't know what the joke is. Just waiting for. She's dying.
Can't breathe.
Okay, I have to move on.
No, the joke was just that they were moo-nionizing. And I don't know why it cracked me up so much.
It took you so long to get that word out. Moo-nionizing.
That's the title of the episode.
This episode isn't even about the Lord of Chaos.
Or Click Clack Moo.
Or Click Clack. Damn, a whole podcast about Click Clack Moo, cows that type. We could do that. This is Everybody Hates Rant, a Wheel of Time podcast. A friendly neighbor. I can't do the own.
Nailed it.
This is Wheel of
This is Wheel of Time.
Fuck. This is Everybody Hates Rant, your friendly neighborhood Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Emily.
And I'm Sally.
And we're not talking about Lord of Chaos, partly because we're very busy with moving and we didn't want to read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And also because, well, mostly just because we didn't want to read the book yet. Lord of Chaos is a really tough book, you guys. I don't know if you've read it recently or in the middle of reading it or anything like that, but like 3 things happen. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it is just sort of Rand going between Camelin and Kyrian repeatedly. And it's like, why? To what end? What's happening? Here are the 3 things that happen that I remember. Egg becomes the Amerlin seat. Rand gets kidnapped and put in a box. And someone says Ashman kill, famously. And those are all war crimes. Not Egg becoming Amerlin. Although that scene is very transphobic. So it's all just like, there are things that happen, but they're not like, they're going to be things that we're complaining about. And it's kind of hard to face that when you pick up a book. At least when we picked up Fires of Heaven, we were like, we're going to reach a scene where Mat Cauthon takes over an entire army and we'll have nothing really bad to say about it because it's fine, it's good, it's delightful. But in Lord of Chaos, it's all just like bad. You know how bad Lord of Chaos is because it starts with a scene where Demandred is talking to the Dark One, and the Dark One talks in all capital letters.
Oh, yeah.
There's something about that I feel is deeply uncreative, and I'm not interested in. But we'll get into that later.
Also, the Black Tower gets started. That's the 3rd thing.
Also, the Black Tower gets started. Also, Rand gives Mazarum Tem an educating license, despite the fact that Mazarum Tem is like, I've done war crimes. And Rand's like, that sounds great. I'd like you to teach every man you come across how to also do war crimes. Mazarum Tem's like, you got it, baby.
And then by the end of the book,
there's just
all doing war
rampant
crimes.
War crimes.
Yeah.
It's the EHR antithesis book because of all the war crimes. I mean, the war crimes doesn't really go into an uphill slide from here. It's all there's just more and more war crimes present in Wheel of Time from here on out.
I know, I'm on chapter like 12 of the Path of Daggers, and in like every single chapter someone's been tortured thus far.
There's just like a lot of we're like reaching. I've been thinking a lot about how Robert Jordan could not decide how long to make this book series when he started. Like, he originally meant it just to be a trilogy, which goes to show you how bad he was at planning things, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's like, up until, I'd say, book 5, it's easy to be like, okay, he was a guy who didn't know how many books he was going to write, but still had a pretty good grasp on the story and what needed to happen in the story. Around about book 6, you realize that this is a guy who has no idea how many books there will be and also has no idea how to get to the ending. Like, he is just fucking flying by the seat of his pants here. And that's, like, not a great feeling to have as a reader. You want a sense of some slight control over the narrative coming from the author. And I think we'll probably end up talking a lot about that, but I think it's just something to reflect on as we are around about 1/3 of the way done with the series now. And the second third of the series is definitively the worst. Because at least when you get to books, books 11 through 14, there's like, okay, something's happening. Even though it was because Brandon Sanderson got a hold of the series and was like, I can't spend my life writing this. Something has to happen.
Thank you, Brandon.
So thank you for your service in that, Brandon. Macathon died for everyone else in the series to reach a conclusion. Maybe not good, satisfying conclusions, but conclusions nonetheless. This episode is so chaotic. I'm so sorry.
We did have a purpose, but...
We did have a purpose, but it sort of flew off the rails. Okay, here's what we wanted to do. Today, if you're listening to this on the Monday it's released, it is Indigenous Peoples Day. Some people still refer to it as Columbus Day, but those people are wrong, because Columbus did nothing worth celebrating. Indigenous people, however, survived, which is worth celebrating.
Yeah, and they've also done a lot of other amazing things that just aren't considered amazing by the lens of Western history, because it wasn't, like, conquering other nations and things like that, so...
Yeah, so we wanted to talk a very little bit about Indigenous peoples and how they are represented, if they are represented in the Wheel of Time and in fantasy as a whole, and maybe give you some recommendations if you are looking for some Indigenous authors or things to be reading right now. So, question number 1. Are Indigenous peoples represented in Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time series? Answer, not in the traditional sense. There are tropes that are associated with Native peoples. Tropes like having a sacred connection to the land. Tropes like being quote-unquote less civilized than a different majority group, or the majority in the sense of who is telling the story, I think. And there are tropes involving also colonialism and imperialism and who has the right to inhabit which portions of land, etc., etc. And all of those things are talked about in Wheel of Time, but they're actually not really combined into one set of people. When it comes to, like, sacred connections to the land, all we really have to go with is the Ogier, which is interesting because the Ogier are the only non-human race that are also not monstrous in the Wheel of Time.
Although they are often mistaken for Trollocs.
They are, yes. They're often put into a monstrous lens by people who are not familiar with them. So you do have some, like, tropes going on there, I think. It's also interesting that the land that the Ogier inhabit is, it is literally, they have a sacred connection to the land and that they cannot leave their portions of land, the steadings, or they will die after a certain amount of time. But it's also this land that just, like, imposes a lack of magic / technology, because in Wheel of Time those two are often conflated. We have magical advances happening at the same rate or more than technological advances. So it just, like, sort of vaunts you back into a different era whenever you enter a steading, which I think is another thing that is often associated with Native peoples.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk more about this when we talk about some authors that you can read, but the Indigenous authors writing in genre fiction right now are writing in a genre that has been coined as Indigenous futurism, which is a term that was coined by Dr. Grace Dillon, professor in the Indigenous Nation Studies program at Portland State University. And I believe that phrase, I believe the term African futurism came first.
Afrofuturism, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard Nnedi Okorafor say it should be African
Oh,
futurism.
cool, okay.
African futurism. She tweets about it enough that if I fucked that up, she can come here and beat me up. That's totally fine. You have my permission. Just wear a mask. And so the idea with both of these genres is that so often when people are depicting Black or specifically African, as in like of the African continent, or Indigenous peoples, it is like that step back in time.
Yeah.
There's a quote from this author, Darcy Little Badger, who says, a lot of times when there's an Apache main character, it feels, it takes place in the 1800s. It almost feels like fiction. People think we didn't survive, but we did, and we're still flourishing. So this idea that people think Indigenous and African people only existed in the past, and that whenever we, like, or even just, like, even if they're, like, of course they exist today, there's this, like, cognitive split where it's, like, there's no technology on reservations, there's no technology in Africa, everyone in Africa is still living in these tiny little villages where they don't have running water, same for Native Americans or other Indigenous peoples. So this idea that you're taking a step backwards in time as opposed to Indigenous and African people, but we're focusing on Indigenous people today. Indigenous people living in the present, and then this genre, Indigenous futurisms, imagining a future for these peoples and what it can look like, hopefully in a more liberated future.
It makes me think of how it was such a cognitive dissonance and an intentional cognitive dissonance in the Marvel movie Black Panther to have Wakanda be this highly advanced, technologically based society that was just like miles and miles ahead of any other country in the world.
Yeah.
Everyone's just like, whoa.
Yeah, that doesn't happen in Africa. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's a really interesting point about the Ogier and technology and like stepping backwards.
Yeah, and you just have the Ogier singing to the trees, etc., etc. So you just kind of have, when you get native characters, I think they're often depicted as a little bit druidic. They have nature powers, quote unquote, or however you get like that. And I don't know, you have a connection also. The Ogier are also very entish. They're also incredibly long-lived, and a lot of what we have with the Ogier is with loyal and recording history, which I just think is very interesting in context to how Indigenous peoples, especially in America, and I should clarify that I am mostly talking about Indigenous peoples in America because those are the ones with which I am most familiar. I know very little about Aboriginal peoples elsewhere. But like with oral storytelling and oral histories and things like that being passed down generation to generation, and you have the Ogier who are also doing much of the same when you have these incredibly long-lived elders, stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of parallels. I definitely would not qualify it as any type of Indigenous representation, obviously, and not even really like the tropes that we're calling attention to border on problematic, only because the Ogier, as Emily pointed out, are the only quote-unquote non-human race. And so often, like, the machine of colonialism functions by dehumanizing people that are not part of the colonial empire. Yeah.
Another trope that I sort of referenced but didn't maybe clarify as much is you have a trope where you have people from a Western society, and Western often is characterized by the type of government I think that there's some sort of monarchy or democracy or empire coming across a group of people who have a less centralized government, and we have that represented with the Ael, who have a really intricate tribal society and clan society and everything going on there. So I think that is another reason why the ale might be your first thought if you're thinking, who are the native peoples in Wheel of Time? But of course the ale also don't fit any sort of representation because, as I said to Sally, they are more like knockoffs of Dune, which itself is a knockoff of Arabic cultures. So you're just having too many layers of, plagiarism going on there.
Let's call it for what it is.
I mean, Robert Jordan just read Dune and was like, sounds neat, but I'll just sprinkle that into my fantasy world. Less sci-fi, though. More fantasy.
Yeah, there's going to be a magic fog city where Matt dies for the second time. First time?
First time, I want to say. How many times does Matt die?
Who's
like Groundhog Day. There's also in Wheel of Time lots of imperialism in the form of the Shanshan. And what you're doing there by having the Shanshan be the invading force is have all of the main continent, Randland, be characterized as the indigenous people, which itself is not necessarily true. The word indigenous is rendered sort of meaningless in the context of Wheel of Time because we're living in a society that Robert Jordan has gone out of his way to remove any really ethnic borders from. The only borders people come across in this world are national borders, like where you're from, essentially.
Yeah, with the exception of, like, the ale and the tinkers. So I think, like, if you were going to, like you said, like, if your first thought would probably be the ale, because they are rendered ethnically different.
Yes.
And the tinkers kind of have the same, not like necessarily ethnically different, but there's like a huge divide in culture there, so you might be like, well, I don't know, hold on.
Yeah.
But again, they are not indigenous peoples.
The
eels, it gets complicated.
It does get complicated, but the problem, of course, with the Shanshan and colonialism is that the Shanshan are ultimately, the way Robert Jordan writes them, they're either not a bad thing or they're a good thing. Because the countries, the parts of the continent that they invade and end up taking over are just, like, cool with their new form of government. They're like, it's cool, they make us swear these oaths, and we have to, the government changes slightly, but ultimately it's better for the common people. And we see it later in the series after the invasion of Abu Dar. We see, what's her name? Tylin and more importantly, her son, Beslin. Is that his name?
I think so.
Yeah. Who was, like, briefly friends with Matt. We see them coming to terms with the Shanshan government taking over and them inserting themselves into the Shanshan hierarchy and finding a way to, like, make it work. And it's just, like, I don't know, pretty problematic. Yeah,
because I feel like that is also not part of the colonialist machine, but part of the colonialist myth.
Yes.
Or justification is that we are going to come in and teach these quote-unquote savages how to live in a proper society, and we're going to govern them better than they could ever govern themselves. And that is simply not true. Like, every group of people has the right to self-govern. And also, like, empires have... There's never been an instance of history in which, like, a major empire, massive empire machine like the Shanshan come in and make things better for people that they are colonizing.
It's literally never better. But you're right, that is totally the mythos. Like, when King Leopold III of Belgium colonized the entire Congo and most of Central Africa, the myth that he and his government was feeding the outside world, because at this point the outside world was interested in the goings-on of other countries, was that he was improving the infrastructure of the places and increasing the employment rates and things like that. And it's like, you're not increasing the employment rates if you are enslaving the entire population.
Yeah, and, like, brutally enslaving them.
Yeah.
Like, the whole thing, King Leopold would, like, chop off people's hands if they didn't meet their quotas.
Yeah, the worst.
Like, he was, like...
He's burning in hell currently.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is definitely part of the colonialist myth.
And it's just frustrating to have it not be called out as a myth in your fantasy text, which is what fantasy should normally be doing if you're a responsible fantasy writer.
Yeah.
Is taking things that happen in the real world and rendering them more, I don't know, a little more accessible to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or just, like, fantasy is a way of, like, re-seeing the world that we live in. And so, like, to just take our world and then plop it in again and be like, it's totally fine. It's why we've talked so much about how we have problems with, like, people just taking this world's gender politics and this world's racial politics. Like, these are all structures. Colonialism is also a you know, structure,
yeah.
something that people invented. And, like, you should be reinventing it or investigating it in a way that isn't beholden to this world's realities. And Robert Jordan is doing that, but in a deeply unethical way, because, like, no empire has ever been like, yes, we are definitely governing the people for the better, and the people are totally cool with us just taking control of their lives. So I guess he is reimagining things, just, again, in a deeply unethical and fucked up way.
Yeah, fantasy should be a way to interrogate power structures, not reinforce them. It's so buck wild.
Such a much more succinct and powerful way than what I was getting at. Thank
you helped me.
I feed you. It was the assist.
Yeah, you
dunked it.
You were like putting a chocolate-covered strawberry in my mouth. I don't even like strawberry.
Okay, I can feed you a hug, a Hershey's hug.
Oh, I do love those.
That powers Emily. She's a robot who runs on Hershey's.
I just ran out of hugs.
Oh no.
It's okay, I have Junior Mints now. I'll just eat Hershey's hugs and Junior Mints. I don't know, I guess. Have you read any good books by Indigenous authors? I've only read so very few.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it is unfortunately like a huge oversight in my reading. I just haven't read very many. And most of what I've read, it's been assigned reading.
Yeah. It's been, and I mean, there are a number of reasons, I think. I don't want to be like a fragile person who's like, it's all on me, but it is also true that there are fewer Indigenous authors in the publishing industry, mostly because the publishing industry is a horrible racist machine.
Yes.
But in America, a lot of Indigenous people's storytelling is oral storytelling, which is not to say that they can't write books or shouldn't write books,
Yeah,
but I
they
think that
definitely
there's
do.
yeah, of course they do. But I think there is a certain amount of coming to it still in the process.
Yeah. And I mean, a huge part of it really is that, like, machine. Like, there are so many different ways to tell stories these days that if someone really wanted to let, like, a group of Indigenous artists do something really cool that was, like, somehow based in the oral medium.
Yes,
there was a way to do that, but everyone is like, we simply must let Brandon Sanderson write another 5,000-page book and it isn't even just a matter of if they're getting published, it's if they're getting marketed correctly, if they're getting protected by the publishing industry. Like, there are so many authors, if they, like, do something wrong, the publishing industry will be, like, there to back them up. Like, I think of that American Dirt lady.
Ugh.
Like, the publishing industry sunk so much money into her book that they, like, had to be there to, like, protect her from anything. And so it's, like, Indigenous authors probably just aren't getting the support.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much like, unfortunately, like, any quote-unquote minority group in this country where it's like a few people stand out and are doing excellent, like Rebecca Rowanhorse, who's written, like,
I think it's Rowanhorse.
Rowanhorse, sorry. I was thank you for correcting me. Rebecca Rowanhorse, who's won, like, a ton of awards and, like, is a New York Times bestselling author, and Stephen Graham Jones, who's, like, deeply prolific in the horror genre and has also won a ton of awards. And so people are like, there we go, problem solved.
Yeah, it's the myth of exceptionalism. If a few
Yeah.
people are doing really well. It's like how people thought when Obama was elected president, racism was over.
We are now living in a post-racial era because a black man was president.
That's the myth of exceptionalism. You have to look at what is happening with the people as a whole. Is everyone afforded these opportunities?
Yeah.
Speaking of Rebecca Rowan Horse, I've only read one of her books called Trail of Lightning, which I don't know if that qualifies as Indigenous futurism, but it was definitively set in the future. But it was more like post-apocalyptic. It was a really interesting book, and I think about it all the time. I don't remember loving it, but I would still recommend it, if that makes sense.
No, I get it, and I think, like, a problem with the idea of everyone, I just think this is a problem, not to get, like, pretentious English major on people, but everyone is like, I want to read genre fiction and, like, fucking love it as much as I love The Wheel of Time, or, God forbid, Harry Potter, if we're, people still can't let go of that, despite the turfery. And I just feel like there's this expectation that genre fiction is, like, fun and escapist and comforting, and that might just be more of the, like, historical baggage around it, but I think people, like, really do struggle with the idea that, like that's how I feel about Who Fears Death. Like, I think about that book all the time, and I would, like, classify it as one of my, like, favorite reads, because it's really interesting and challenged a lot of my ways of thinking, but it wasn't necessarily that I, like, really liked it, you know?
Yeah,
like,
that was tough to read.
Yeah, that qualifier, like, is so difficult, because it's like, I like Click Clack Moo, how's that type? But it doesn't challenge me in any way or teach me anything or, like, really expand my, like, creative understanding of the world.
Yeah.
So, like, that qualifier of, like, liking something or loving something is tough, I think. Sorry, that was a total sidebar.
No, I think it's interesting. I think it's probably my personal hangups that prevented me from liking Trail of Lightning. I can totally see how someone would get very into it, because it's got a lot of really cool things going for it. The main character is this very, like, she's, like, hunts supernatural creatures. That's really cool. And she's very, like, cocky and sarcastic, and you love to see it in your female protagonist, you know, and she's got weird, interesting relationships with gods. The love interest is very good and interesting, which is cool. I don't know, it's just, like, an interesting way, because it is set in a post-apocalyptic world where I think most of the country has flooded. I could be wrong. And so it's, like, set kind of in the Rocky Mountains region, where a lot of the surviving peoples are people who are on reservations. And it was just, I don't know, it was a lot of what I like about the CW supernatural put into a book. And also told from a Navajo woman's perspective. Yeah, going back to your point, this is a little bit tangential, but going back to your point about so much of Indigenous storytelling in the land that we now call the United States, being oral, is I read this article in the New York Times about Indigenous authors writing in the genre fiction, that broad umbrella, and apparently, like, a lot of, like, a significant contingent of, like, Navajo elders, like, are really upset that, like, Rebecca Rowan Horse was, like, using these stories, because it's, like, they're not for, I think their quote was, like, they're not for entertainment, like, they are part of our... a lot of the mythology.
Yeah, and I think that is, just interesting.
It is interesting. And, something to look into further, and...
Yeah, I definitely would say that my research for this episode was definitely... much more cursory than the topic deserves, and so I hope that we can revisit it in a year on next year's Indigenous Peoples Day, and hopefully, I'd like to challenge us to read more Indigenous authors and learn more about it, to have, the ability to do them the justice that they deserve.
Yeah, but if you're looking to get into it, starting points we can offer are Rebecca Rowan Horse. If you're looking for fiction, I recently read a book called The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich. She's a very prolific writer, not in fantasy, but in fiction. And her book, I've only read I think I've read a few of her books, but that one was really incredible and has stuck with me and tackles a lot of the issues that are ongoing, such as the rampant violence against women in Indigenous communities. So would recommend that. If you want YA, Sherman Alexie wrote. The one I've read of his was The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian.
I have not read this book, but in the research that I was doing, I think this one sounds really interesting. It's the author Darcy Little Badger, who I quoted earlier. She has a novel. It's either coming out or has come out. I can't remember when this article was written, but it's called Elazzo. And it's a young adult fantasy about a 17-year-old Lipan Apache girl who can awaken the ghosts of dead animals and sets out to solve her cousin's murder.
Damn,
Doesn't that sound lit?
Yeah.
I think it sounds lit as hell.
What the? Cool.
Yeah. Also, I mean, it's these days, it's very easy to find lists of like X, like 5 books by X identity author that you need
we
to
talked
be
about
reading.
that briefly a little while ago. How lists like that are problematic because you don't ever want to recommend people based solely on their ethnicity.
Yeah.
But those lists make things more accessible to readers who don't have.
Yeah, so it's like, it's complicated, but they are out there. If you just, like, I just Googled Indigenous fantasy authors, and there are, like, literally a dozen articles, so, yeah, but...
If you do read anything by Stephen Graham Jones, just know that he taught us an entire class about werewolves.
Yeah.
And it was,
That is not to say I have not read any of his work.
I thought you read that one book.
I did read his, like, weird memoir, but I'm gonna be honest, that was the summer after I graduated college, and I was, like, not fully there, so I don't really remember it, because I was literally sustaining myself on saltines and my anxiety about moving to New York City, so I can't remember anything I read that summer. And that, I think, is also very different than his other work.
Yeah, he does horror.
Yeah, he does horror, and, I mean, he's very prolific. He's written a ton of books, and he wins, like, all of the awards. And, like, there was a reason, apparently, that he was brought to our university to teach this class. Apparently, he's some type of expert. Personally, on a personal level, we did have to sit through an entire werewolf class where he once used Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance as a stock image.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That werewolf class, you could have listened to like 3 episodes of Lore by Aaron Mahnke and gotten the same effect as that full semester of werewolf classes. But yeah, I mean, if you read him,
it's one of those
let us
things,
know how he is.
Yeah, it's one of those Emily and Sally Lore. We took a werewolf class. We drove a U-Haul across the country.
There she goes.
Yeah.
Okay, so homework.
Find
an Indigenous author to read, one we recommended, or one
Yeah.
that you go out and find.
And then if you like them, please let us know.
Yeah.
So we can continue our education too.
Read, and within a year, we will do the same and come back next Indigenous Peoples Day and review.
Yeah.
Talk a little more about it.
Yeah. They're just like 2 teens like macking out in front of our window.
What's happening? He's wearing a Bernie shirt.
Yeah.
Should I go yell at them? Get off my lawn!
That was really random, because I was like, what is Tybalt looking at? And then these 2 kids are just sucking face out there.
Tybalt's never seen aggressive macking like that. Damn.
That kid looked gross, though. I hope she dumps him.
I developed no opinions on them.
He just had, like, a really thin mustache.
Oh, he did? I didn't see that.
And, like, long
I saw
snowboarder
the
hair.
long hair.
And the Bernie shirt.
Like, he'd be wearing... Oh, yeah. It's just, like, a combination of
Yeah.
unfortunate things.
Like, the Bernie shirt I would have no problem with if the other two weren't indicators of Bernie bro-ness.
Yeah. You don't want to be a Bernie bro. Hey, guys, the election is coming up. Just a reminder to vote. And to vote for Joe Biden.
Yes.
He's a centrist, but you know what? It's better than a fascist dictator. And that's where we're at in the political climate right now, so get out there.
Yep. And please vote safely. If that means you are voting by mail-in ballot, that's great, but everything is recommending that you actually go and drop your ballot off at one of the drop boxes rather than sending it through the post. I think that's supposed to help cut down on some workload, the post office. I think is what that is. If you are voting in line and in person, that's awesome. Just remember to keep your social distancing and wear your fucking mask. If I see any of you out there voting without a mask, I will personally...
Well, we know who you're voting for if that's the case.
Yeah, well, yeah, good point. But I will personally come and kick your ass.
In terms of programming, sorry that this wasn't Wheel of Time specific, although we did talk about Wheel of Time. Sorry that this wasn't Lord of Chaos specific.
I mean, you shouldn't apologize. That book sucks ass.
We are getting to Lord of Chaos, but again, we are in the middle of a move, and we do not quite know what the future will hold. We're taking another bye week, but then we will for sure be back the following Monday with your regularly scheduled Lord of Chaos content. Our reading schedule is up on the website.
It is up on the website, correct?
We're taking 2 full episodes to talk about the prologue because the prologue is so long and covers so many points of view. So #prayers, please, for us.
I hate prologues. I hate Wheel of Time prologues the most.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to Demandra talk to the Dark One.
It's just most of the Forsaken talking. That's the entire prologue. It's just the Forsaken talking.
But I hate
scheming.
the Forsaken.
They're all terrible. And this is the one where we start getting people resurrected.
I don't know.
And I don't care.
It's so complicated.
Bah.
The point of having 13 of them or whatever is that we can just systematically
Kill them off. That's what I want.
Yeah.
From a group of bad guys.
Fucking resurrecting these motherfuckers.
It's not fair. It's stupid.
Ugh.
Okay. Anyway, that's that. Anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to give a quick plug for our Patreon. It is the only way that we support this podcast and honestly support the kind of astronomical amount of work that we do to make this podcast possible. We don't obviously have any advertisers or you would have heard them. And so the Patreon funds are a great way if you want to... support this podcast that you like and get access to some really rad bonus content. We are about to finish our watch of HBO's Watchmen. Perhaps we'll do Trail of Lightning next. That might be kind of interesting. And Emily has got 8 weeks left of A Memory of Light.
9 weeks.
9 weeks left.
Time of recording.
9 more blogs.
Number 69.
Nice.
Has to happen.
Nice.
I plotted it out with sticky notes. You can see my copy of A Memory of Light.
Amazing. Emily has blogged through her reread of the last 3 Wheel of Time books, so if you want to subscribe to her Patreon, even at the $1 level, you have 60 more blogs you can read of her.
That's just A Memory of Light.
What? You have like 1,000 blogs you can read.
Yeah. So
Memory of Light is too long.
You probably have 50 for the other 2, each. So
I need to fall asleep now.
Okay.
Memory of Light is too long.
I know.
Anyway, so yeah, please support us on Patreon if you are able to and interested. And yeah, we will see you on the other side of the war, this move.
Are you doing a sign-off for us?
I don't really have one.
Okay.
So.
Hey, don't do war crimes.
Please, dear God, it's not that hard.
Goodbye.